Hello, everybody. My name is Perry Gruber. I am the founder of Copiosis. Welcome to I think this is our second or third live stream. Today, we're going to be talking with a few political experts who are going to talk with us about the political strategies, the tools, and the strategies that could potentially pave the way for Copiosis becoming a reality. Of course, we here at Copiosis believe that we have to use politics in order to make Copiosis happen because we're in a organization or a civic organization or government of laws, and laws are changed through the political process, and Copiosis is going to need some sort of laws at some point in its transition in order to make it a reality. And so we have to work within the political system to make it a reality. And so as part of our transition plan, we have always included a political strategy. And thankfully, as I've said since I started Copiosis, the right people are coming on board at the right time. And one of those people who has joined us is our political strategist, Christopher Hatton, who is the legislative director at is it the House of Representatives, Christopher?
Yeah,
Is
in
that right?
Michigan.
In Michigan, correct. So welcome to the show, Christopher. Good to see you. You're looking sharp in your suit and tie. We normally don't have coat and tie at Copiosis, but we do this especially for you guys, the audience, to show that we're not just a bunch of crackpots. We're professional people doing professional things in addition to this wonderful innovation that we are very passionate about. So Christopher is going to be joining me as a co-host, and I'm going to be relying on him to help facilitate the conversation with our two political experts, both of whom have their own chops in this area. I'm just going to, from time to time, audience, I'm going to be looking to my left to make sure that we are streaming adequately, and it looks like we are, so that's good. So let's get right to it and introduce our guests. So first, from about, I'd say 14 miles from where I am, we have Heidi Briones. Welcome to the show, Heidi.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Perry.
You're very welcome. And Heidi ran for Oregon's, what is it called? District 1, I believe. Is that correct?
First
Yep.
district, yep.
Yep. In the primaries, and was backed by Andrew Yang, or not backed, but endorsed by Andrew Yang and Marianne Williamson. So I think it's fair to say, Heidi, that you're a progressive. Is that fair to say?
I'd say so. It depends on the definition, but I'm in favor of progress and making things better. But yeah, good. It's a loaded word sometimes.
It is. It is a loaded word.
In the literal definition, yes. I like progress, yes.
Okay, good. It is a loaded word. You're absolutely right. So welcome to the show. And then also we have joining us today a political candidate who is in the running. We have Michael Vick. Michael is running in the state of, I have a District 29 in the state of, there we go, Indiana. Is that correct, Mike?
That's right. That's right. I'm running in the Hoosier State for sure. A little bit far away from Oregon, slightly more than 14 miles. But yeah. And unlike all our well-dressed guest here, I'm a crackpot wearing exercise clothing. So thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Welcome to the show. Okay, so I'd like to just start out with all of you by asking a kind of softball question about Copiosis, and just get, of course, Christopher, you're not eligible to answer this question because you're kind of on the team. But for Heidi and Michael, what do you guys see in Copiosis that has you interested enough to be on this show generally, or interested enough in Copiosis generally, and then interested enough to be on the show specifically talking about political strategies that could open the door for Copiosis? And why don't we start with Mike, since we started with Heidi the first round. So Mike.
Sure. So, I've been very interested in moving beyond our current really very exploitative economic system for a long time now. I do self-identify as a libertarian socialist, so I am quite far to the left politically. As Heidi mentioned, the word progressive gets thrown around for folks that are as left as I am. And then some folks would call Joe Biden a progressive. So the word has sort of lost a lot of meaning. But I do believe wholeheartedly in moving toward a more egalitarian economic system. Copiosis really resonates with me because it would be moving us beyond a phase of economics where our basic needs are whether or not those are met are determined almost entirely by accidents of our birth and by our ability to head out into the often unforgiving marketplace and make our way in that way, sort of a survival of the fittest economics. I don't think that that's a very humane system. So I'm quite interested in things like copiosis, and I found that copiosis specifically among the other plans that I've seen like it had a more pragmatic approach to actually bringing it about. So that's really what drew me to it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mike. And Heidi, what brought you to Copiosis?
Yeah, I mean, I think since I was just a little girl, I've always thought that the system seemed a little bit out of whack, and just the incentives rather were wrong, and that people were incentivized oftentimes for poor behavior, and that the market would reward them for that. And while I'm not a socialist, I do see that there's a problem with the incentives, and that's one reason why I do support things like UBI, universal health care, reforming our democracy to make things a bit more equal, make everybody have that floor that they can kind of stand on and know that they feel secure in that. So with Copiosis, what I like is that people's basic needs are essentially taken care of, from what I understand. And so that goes along with what I believe. I believe that people's basic needs should be taken care of. Nobody should have to worry about going bankrupt over getting ill or, not being able to feed themselves. But then also I do want there to be, equality of opportunity rather than full equity. I would like, somebody does something amazing for the world, then they're rewarded more than somebody who just lays around on the couch. I do see that there should be incentives. I think they're messed up right now. And I think that Copiosis has a way of fixing that part. While I do want to still see incentives and people be rewarded for doing good things. So I really liked that when I heard about it and interested in learning more.
So Heidi, maybe I jumped the gun by labeling you as a progressive. I did that for the audience's sake based on my interpretation of what your website says. So maybe if you wouldn't mind just real quickly saying, how do you see yourself from a political lens?
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, I'm kind of struggling with that right now. Just as far as labels, I really feel like this left-right dichotomy is kind of leading us off a cliff right now, and I've been doing a lot of deep thinking about it. I mean, obviously, I lean left. I'm overall a leftist, but I also see the need to come more to the center at this particular moment in time so that we can meet and talk about ideas and not divide ourselves so fully that we become too tribal. So I'm a little bit concerned about being too tribal at this exact moment in history. So I do find myself moving more to the center, not ideologically, but just in my activities and my thought processes and the conversations that I'm open to having. Important right now that more people come together and meet more in the middle. So while I do lean to the left, I don't have an exact ideological home. I guess I'm a little bit politically homeless at the moment because I'm more interested in bringing us together more than dividing us.
Yeah, that's what we're seeing too at Copiosis, and that's why we're happy to say that thanks to Christopher for coming on board. We have changed our messaging and our outreach to address the needs of people to the right, and we are being a little bit more successful, actually quite a bit more successful than we have been in the past in bringing people together. And it's one of the unique things that I see happening with Copiosis compared to other organizations in our ecosystem. So thank you very much for answering that question. Yeah. All right, well, let's jump into it. So as you all have taken a little bit of, at least a little look at what Copiosis is all about and how we propose it's going to happen, what are kind of the, and in fact, great dovetail off of what you were saying, Heidi, with regard to the division in politics and our social structure and our society right now. What do you guys see as far as new tools and strategies that are coming down the pike to have our politics function more efficiently, but also function in a way that could allow room for something like Copiosis to be tested, legally tested? So what kind of political tools or mechanisms or strategies need to be in place that you see are realities or emerging realities that could potentially happen in our political framework and actually help Copiosis become a reality? Chris, you want to start us off, Christopher?
I'd like to follow up if that's okay.
Sure,
so
of course.
Have the guests lead the conversation, and then
absolutely.
Then I can follow up from a standpoint from the right, and then throw in some economics on it too.
Go right ahead. Yeah. Can you hear me, Christopher? Are you there?
Yeah, I passed it to either Heidi or Mike to start.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Gotcha.
Mike, do you want to start this one off? Or?
Sure. So, I think that one of the things that's critically important at this juncture is that we have a deeply polarized political environment where folks, are getting to the point where they identify so much with political parties and identify to the degree that they are willing to call people in the opposing political party enemies of the state, enemies of the people, and I even went so far as to be physically threatened by an old family friend, someone who was a old teacher of mine in elementary school, said that because I identify as a socialist, I was an enemy of the people, and that she would defend herself against folks like myself by force if necessary. I think that that's deeply disturbing, political development, certainly not a new thing. But I think that our two-party system does tend toward that polarization and that othering, and more and more people are not identifying with either political party, but there doesn't seem to be any real movement toward a multi-party system. So I think that one of the ways that we can bring new ideas like Copiosis to the fore is really by breaking down the barriers to those new ideas emerging on the political landscape by breaking down the two-party system. And so I'm running as a Democrat, but have many problems with the present leadership of the Democratic Party, and so I think that we should be moving more in that independent direction. One of the ways that we can do that is by changing the way that we vote, and so I'm in favor of, and have put in my platform a few reforms that I think would go in that direction. The score voting system, I think, would go a long way toward elevating the role of individual voters in our democratic system by allowing folks to score every person on their ballot from, say, 0 to 5. And the candidate with the highest average score wins. Modification of that that could deal with some strategic voting issues would be to allow the top 2 candidates to go into an automatic runoff. It's called STAR. Actually, it's been advocated for in Oregon, where you all live. And I think it's a system that would really give a leg up to independent parties and independent movements, and would lessen the gatekeeper role that political parties play in our elections by potentially allowing us to eliminate party primaries altogether, which would also eliminate the help to lessen the role of money in politics, for sure.
So let's jump over there to Heidi. Heidi, say what you want in response to Mike or Christopher's statement, and then if you wouldn't mind embellishing on what Micah said about this STAR process.
Yeah. What respond to which statement by Christopher? Or did you?
Yeah, I said I'll go last instead of first.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm against you going last. No, I'm just kidding. So essentially, I agree with a lot of what Mike is saying. I think that we need to actually reform our democratic process. So democracy reform was a large tenet of my platform. The main 3 tenets that I was focused on were democracy reform, universal health care, and universal basic income. And I think that all goes in line with Copiosis and leading down a path of establishing a new system that would be more fair, have better incentives, and be just overall better and more sustainable for society. So I'm definitely in favor of voting measures such as ranked choice, approval, STAR. I'm also in favor of public funding of elections, either through a voucher program or otherwise, whatever makes the most sense. Of course, moving to a more open primary system at the state level, making sure that's a lot more fair, making it easier for independents to actually run. Right now, you run into extreme cost and a lot of barriers to run independent, if you even can, in the state that you're in. So making all of those things a lot easier, making it so regular people can actually join the conversation, whether they're elected officials or otherwise. I do think that we need more people with lived experience within our society at the different rungs, rather than just the upper rungs where they experience more benefits from the current incentive structure. We need to have people from all different rungs of society represented, so that we can actually have these conversations about what is actually wrong with the system, what's actually messed up, why we're in the situation that we're in, why we have a pandemic and we're not prepared for it, rather, either medically or economically. So I think that the way that we're going, I'm hopeful. I'm, pessimistically, cynically hopeful, I guess, because we can go either one way or another right now. So I feel that as long as we can keep pushing for these measures, we do have a lot of hope and opportunity to pass some democracy reform and hopefully have more of these open conversations at a higher level, that we can get some change done.
Awesome. And Chris, do you want to just jump on in here now? Christopher, sure. Take it away.
Yes, thank you, Mike and Heidi. And I'll go right on ahead and say, a large piece of a conservative kind of playbook is to be able to, draw the districts in a certain way. And, it's otherwise known as gerrymandering. And then, require people to go to the polls to vote with voter ID. So that can be considered as, voter suppression and or, whatever way you're looking at it. And I believe that those two things help solidify the two-party system. And I believe that it is that way, and this is what I have come to understand, is that there's a lot more people that live in urban areas that do lean left than there are people decentralized, scattered throughout rural areas that lean right. So, in my opinion, that's the reason to engage in a system like that, is to keep this grand old party, right-leaning, small government, low taxes, we'll do it ourselves kind of platform alive. So, excuse me. And I think there's that alone has caused a lot of strife, and because it seems like equality doesn't really ring true when we're trying to say that this vote doesn't count as much as this vote. And I understand that argument. Another thing, like Mike said, yeah, there's a lot of kind of not the negative feelings associated with identifying as a partisan at this point. And I believe that, it's part of our duty, as Americans, to voice your opinion on what you think is horrible and what you think is good. And it's definitely more prevalent now because it's more out in the open because of social media and other mechanisms. But like Mike said, again, it's not new. I'd say that, we are at a point in our country that, there is separation occurring, but I'd say that that's happened since day one. But in regards to money in politics, I do believe that there is a reason why lobbyists set up their shops near the capitals, and why it's a revolving door when you get elected and they come into your office asking elected legislators to do something or not to do something, influencing leadership who then can influence you. So it's about really these institutions themselves are the malevolent actors. Even if there's good-hearted people inside of them, it's the institution itself that's used the people in power or orchestrate within the institution. So it's all derived by the power situation in the world or the state or whatever.
So let's get more into that in a second. Thank goodness that we're not on network TV, because I would be getting in trouble right now because I'm 2 minutes past the break. So let's just take a quick break right now and just say to the audience that you're watching a Copiosis live stream. We're talking about politics. If you're interested in finding out more about Copiosis, you maybe haven't been here before, you can check out the website www.copiosis.com. If you've been here before and you're not a patron and you're perhaps interested in becoming a patron, because what we're talking about is so fantastic and you're just really excited about what we're talking about in terms of the potential, you can go to our Patreon page there, and there you can find out how we're spending all of the patron money. We have the budget listed there and everything, and you can actually become a patron and support our work. And then finally, if you're interested in finding out more about what happens on our live stream and on our YouTube channel generally, I would ask you to please hit that subscribe button and then click the bell to make sure that you are alerted to any new live streams coming. We're always going to have more live stream activity coming in the future with more presentations and more recorded presentations, and then also more live streams. All right, so let's get back to the conversation. Chris, you were talking about something that's very interesting, and I would love it if our guests, Heidi and Mike, would join in on this discussion, this part of the discussion, because I think this gets to the crux of the matter relative to being able to use the political process to make something like Copiosis happen. And that is these institutions. I'm not going to call them malevolent institutions. I think their behavior can be described as malevolent, but the institutions themselves, it's kind of hard to describe them as malevolent in my perspective, because in the attempt to avoid labels, these people are doing what I think they think is the right thing. And we're all trying to do what we all think is the right thing. And the problem often occurs, and you said it, Christopher, so well, since the beginning of our country, we've never really agreed on what the right thing is. And I think we thought that politics would be one way that we could balance that agreement, or some way compromise on the agreement. And so talk a little bit more about what you're meaning by these institutions being able to control the political system. And then Heidi and Mike, if you just jump on in and just treat this as a free conversation. If you guys just jump in, interrupt each other. We only have another 20-minute segments. Okay, go for it.
All right, I'll go real quick on that. And I would disagree with what you just said, Perry, because people can go in thinking one thing, but then you get influenced. and that's by the power that's external to the institutions. But the institution helps drive that influence down. So unless you're going to reject leadership, corporations, everybody but the constituents, you're going to have a target on your back, and you're not. And it's, if it comes down to money and campaigns, you're going to be excommunicated. So there's a lot at risk in that sense. And this is definitely my opinion from what I've seen. It's anecdotal and it's all over the place. I'm sure there's studies been done on it. But then I believe also, that we're able to do some of these things, like, be able to create increases in standard of living separate from the political spectrum and separate from politics and government in general. And I'd argue this is being done through, the open source movement, and that's separate from all of this. So, it's like, in my opinion, the power pillars, the largest ones are government, business, nonprofit, religion, and then, some other ones. But they, design the society from which we live. And I guess what my argument is that through the open source movement, society itself is saying, thanks, government, business, religion, nonprofit, but we'll take this good or service and do it ourselves.
Gotcha. Heidi, Mike, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Well, I would say, as someone who again self-identifies as a libertarian socialist, there's another word for that, and that is anarchist. I actually like a lot of what has just been said in terms of allowing folks to do things on their own, and we can set up sort of mutual aid networks and help each other in ways that don't require a government solution. So this is one of those ways in which you go far enough left on the political spectrum, and you find yourself agreeing with folks on the sort of libertarian right, oftentimes, and in terms of pushing back against government control of things. I think that the more decentralized we can get in terms of our economic system, the more distributed we can get, the more power we can put into more hands, the better off we are. And so whether that's in the political sphere or the economic sphere, I think that both of those are incredibly important, and so things that I promote, like workplace democracy, seeing more cooperative enterprises where people are able to take control over their own workplaces and have a stake and an ownership stake and a voting stake where they work. I think that goes directly to the idea of that decentralization of power that we need to see more and more of in our society.
So one of the people, Heidi, do you have something you want to add there?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so one of the people in the audience made a comment. I just want to throw this in here and see what your responses are. The guy running by the name of Numero Set has made the comment, oh, I can't get it to show up in the show itself. There, well, let's put it in my screen. There we go. So he says the primary divide is by class, inherent in selective distribution economic systems like capitalism. So do you guys agree or disagree, or have a different version of what he's saying, that class is the primary divider, inherent, and this divider is inherent in selective distribution economic systems like capitalism?
So I'll be quick with this. I think in concept that does hold true. I think when we look at inequality in general, we're talking about a certain size pie from which, if somebody can accumulate more and more, they accumulate more power and more ability to influence through the accumulation of their wealth. But what Copiosis is trying to present is this center, this core, from which necessities are provided, which does the following. It increases standard of living for anybody who's participating in Copiosis to a level through abundance to where they lift that burden off of their shoulders, and they don't have to depend on government for it. They don't have to depend on businesses or religion or charity. This is provided through abundance. So there are assumptions that go through abundance, and abundance economics is a new principle because there's few goods and services now that are subject to abundance, like in a scalable fashion. You can, localize your target market and do abundance type, thought experiments. But in general, some new digital products definitely are subject to abundance, and there's some new economic paradigms being drawn out from those. But I'm going on. I'm just talking.
That's okay. It was a good answer. So getting back to the topic just before Numero Set made his comment. So back to the institutions. If we democratize, if we make the decision-making process more democratized or spread out more, how in the current system, with money doing what it does, because money is the fuel that runs everything, including politics. First of all, how could we get to a more decentralized method of running the politics? And then secondly, if we do get to that, how do these new technologies that we're going to be getting to hopefully in a few minutes, how do these new political technologies help minimize the impact of the dollar on that, even new processes? Because we know that the current processes are strongly dominated by the dollar. So you guys have any opinions on that?
I mean, I don't know if I have the answer for that. That's maybe a bit beyond my expertise, but I will say that with the development of technology in so many different formats, including, open source technology that Christopher was mentioning, as well as automation, and other things that we're seeing happening, before our eyes, I do believe that, I mean, while it does sound good to have a democratized workplace, I'm not sure that that's going to be the future of work. I see work becoming less and less important over the years, and people finding other ways to make money rather than in a workplace. So, while that may have been a great idea, and while it is a great idea in theory to democratize a workplace and those types of ideas, I just think that the future is heading in a more individual, decentralized kind of direction, with more people ending up, you're seeing it already as like gig workers or self-employed or doing their own thing, or just somehow finding a way to be outside of the system more, because the system isn't working for them and they need to figure out a way to make that work. So I think that my hope is that as technology increases, as things like UBI are passed and eventually, some kind of healthcare system that we can all have access to, that and working less and less and less, I think that ideas like Copiosis will just seem to make the most possible sense over time. So I think that'd be a natural sort of progression from what I'm seeing now and for what I see coming in the future.
Okay, so you mentioned UBI. We've mentioned the star voting process. I'm curious how the star voting process is different from ranked choice voting, if it's different at all. Maybe we can talk about that in a second. Yeah. But before we get to that, I want to ask you, Heidi, you have experience being a gig worker, and my understanding of your experience based on what I read was that your experience of it was that it still wasn't enough to make ends meet. And so,
Right.
how do you see, first of all, how do you see individuals making it through kind of like this Dead Sea, this process that's going to start with conversations like these and the political system as it is now, and the end being where we have these new processes in place that allow democracy to function in a more democratic way? There's this gap where people are going to be trying to do what you're saying, find alternative ways to earn a living. But it seems like for many of these people, and by your experience yourself, these gig opportunities aren't sufficient. So how do you go ahead? You got a rebuttal to that?
Yeah, no, I mean, they're not sufficient necessarily financially, but I think that what's attractive about gig work is the freedom. And I think that more and more people want to be less and less tied down. So we haven't figured it out quite yet, because you have these corporations that go into bidding wars with each other, which makes gig working not work anymore. I mean, at the beginning, it worked very well for Lyft, and Uber drivers were doing great. But then those two companies start to compete with each other, because this is capitalism, and they run each other down on their prices. And before you know it, the gig workers are paid nothing. So I think like the concept is good. We just haven't quite figured out the incentive system. And I think that one reason why I like UBI is because I feel like it does bridge that gap. I feel like providing a basic income for everybody will bridge some of those transitional periods. So that's one way that we could potentially bridge it. But then there's also new things that I can't even predict or imagine quite yet that are coming with technology that I'm just not smart enough to know about. But I do believe that there is technology in the open source market and with blockchain and other things that will enable gig work to become more feasible, such as maybe time banking, for example, or maybe you're not earning as much money as you did with your old job, but now you're earning all this time. And now you have somebody that can help you with your chores and other things. So I think that when we move to more of these, different types of structures, I believe that the transition can be alleviated through several different methods, including a UBI or technology as well.
Christopher, I see you shaking your head there. You want to jump in here?
Yes. So I'm glad that you brought in the technology piece there, because I'm generally not a supporter of UBI alone, and just the normal, like I teach economics as a gig, a side gig online for community college. And one of the things that I like to get straight with my students is that when the money system in general, but when you inject money into the system, it signals merchants to increase prices. So I'll get to my leveling point in a second, but we're starting to see that right now with the injection that happened during the COVID phase. And it didn't happen right away, because what we call the velocity of money, or how quickly the exchange of money is happening for goods and services, didn't quite pick up until just recently. So we're just now starting to see that inflation rate tick up towards 2% again, and we're predicting it's going to go above 3%, which is beyond the level of what the Fed wants. And then, so my argument is UBI without deflationary pressure on the necessities will only be a very temporary increase of the standard of living, because merchants will increase prices because of the level of money in the system. So UBI in combination with deflation, in my opinion, is a way that we can spend less money than we're spending now, and everybody can have healthcare, everybody can have for education. And then I'll be real quick with this, but when you converge technologies, like you were saying, so for instance, artificial intelligence and, edutainment on a device, and then live streaming for streaming instruction, that can converge into this high quality educational experience at no cost. So, there's a lot of convergence happening, like in healthcare. If you converge CRISPR with DNA sequencing and deep learning. You can have free diagnostics, so you relieve all this diagnostic stress on the healthcare system, which then frees up a lot of that cost. So there's a lot of things at play here that can be utilized to create this abundance that we're trying to solidify for everybody. Excuse me.
Thank you for that, Chris. So this is perfect because it's like the next 20-minute segment has just ended, and I can jump in here and do a little plug. So thank you so much for watching the show. Even if you're watching it after it was shown live, you're watching Copiosis live stream, and we are talking about politics and how politics can have an influence on making it easier. Actually, we believe it's the only way that we're going to make Copiosis a reality, because we need legislation passed in order to make it happen at some point. And so we have several people who are experts in politics, or at least have political experience, talking about some of the tools that will allow that kind of thing to happen. If you're interested in finding out more about Copiosis, you can go to copiosis.com and learn all about our innovation and what we're doing and how we're doing it. And then if you know about Copiosis and you want to get more involved, you can come onto our social group on Facebook, or you can become a patron by going to that link there and checking out the ways that you can support us financially. And all the money that you provide us goes towards making Copiosis a reality. And then finally, if you're new to the YouTube channel, please be sure to click the subscribe button and then click the bell icon so that you get notifications of upcoming live streams and recorded programs that we will be loading in the future. All right, so Chris, that was a good response, and there's a comment in the comment section that dovetails nicely with what you're saying relative to what the show is about. KJ says he thinks the big reason so many people are angry is because nobody is listening to them. And so if we're talking about these great ideas and potential ways of solving or moving Copiosis forward and solving our political problems, how are we going to make these things happen through politics if no one's listening to what people like us are talking about and the big moneyed interests are running the show? How do we implement these new technologies like UBI, like STAR, or ranked choice voting, or other technologies to make democracy more democratic, so that the people in the democracy are actually being heard, besides the special interests who live right next to the political power centers?
That is the question. Yeah. How do we
do
that?
Do you have an answer, Heidi?
I wish I did. I mean, that'd be great. I don't have the clearest answer. I mean, I hope that things like this, independent media, which we have been seeing is coming much further along than it has been, especially in the last few years. I mean, when I talk to my grandmother, for example, and she doesn't consume very much independent media, she just watches the news and she maybe sees a few things on Facebook, but we have a very different viewpoint of what's going on, I've noticed, because I watch a lot of independent media. I don't really watch any cable news or anything, and I look at both sides as well. I watch things from the left and the right and the center and try to figure out what I think is going on based on the facts, but she just really will just watch a few clips. But when I talk to people my own age, I feel like we're much more invested in independent media. And most people I know that are involved in politics, they either follow some people on Twitter or they're on YouTube, and they get their information from a lot more independent sources. So I think that making sure that, we can increase the amount of people creating content and focusing on making sure that it remains as free as possible, which is going to be, I think, the new frontier, because the Twitters and the Googles and the Facebooks of the world are now almost the government. So that will be the big question coming up here, is how can we allow free speech to continue, and how can we amplify everyone's voice to the point where they're part of the conversation at least, and they have a voice. And how do we mitigate, with these large conglomerates and companies with their control that have, the conversation. So I think that those will be the big questions coming up.
Chris, do you want to weigh in here, because it seems like you have some ideas of how technology and these future ideas can potentially democratize and decentralize processes like the political process and make it actually more democratic, with individuals having a bigger voice. Do you have any input to that?
So yeah, and then I'll pass it on to Mike because I know he began speaking about this with his with the work democracy plan part. But
Great.
I've been I've been researching for the past half dozen years decentralization of power and the mechanisms at play that would make something like that possible. So for me, it starts with participatory measures, and when you can get participation in what are very complex things like budgeting of the money and participatory input on voting on bills and participatory input of allocation of the budget. So these things aren't used right now, but they are being developed by the open source community. And I'll segue in saying participatory budgeting is being used. There are over 4,000 current examples of participatory budgeting. The most prevalent, the biggest one is New York City right now. Their entire alderman level, closest to the ground, have engaged in participatory budgeting, and they actually.
Christopher, I'm sorry. Can you? So for the people who are going to watch this in the future, who are in the audience now, could you describe real briefly how does participatory budgeting work?
So right now, it's an allotted segment of the budget. So in New York City, for the entire city, and that's, I believe it's 20. No, it's 50, close to 50 districts at the local level there. $35 million, from which the people go to their aldermen and say that and then they say, here's a list of projects. So then that list gets voted on in a 9-day period by the people of New York, saying we want this project, and then it's about. Then they get to vote on the allocation of funds towards those projects that are picked. So then it's really an awesome thing. And then in the Congo, there was an actual participatory budgeting mechanism put into play, and there was research done on this. And over time, they were able to build multiple schools and drainage systems and infrastructure. And then the most important piece of that research, in my opinion, was that the amount of people that paid taxes increased. They stopped evading paying taxes if they could say where it goes.
Mm-hmm.
And this is in the most
non-democratic,
right?
Yeah.
So it's an expanding movement, and it took over the entire city of New York from fall of 2017 until summer of this year. Now the entire city is participating in it, and it's going to. Sorry,
that's okay. So when a community votes, is it like the political system today, where the majority of the votes get the majority of the money, or is it more like rank choicing, so that number one gets funded with most of the money, and the number two gets funded with a little bit of the money? How does it work?
So there are rules set up with limits and maxes, and
okay.
Depending on the area. So within the reasonable error, margin of error there.
Got it.
But okay. In general, it is a proactive, provocative way to get people involved.
For sure.
And then I would say, when you converge things like this with blockchain technology, it's going to lead to a scalable mechanism to where things will happen automatically without you having to trust for that to happen. And that will be backed by smart contracts that'll have to fulfill a certain amount of, requirement to release the money. So it's, and I believe that the inputs are going to be sensor driven. So not human inputting the data, because there's a lot, if it's garbage in, garbage out. So it's all going to be sensor driven eventually, to eliminate as much human error as possible from the equation.
Gotcha. Did you want to pass on to
we haven't heard
I know
from Mike.
we haven't heard from Mike.
That's okay. I've been enjoying the conversation. So, I think that what we're getting at really is the degree to which we need to democratize our thinking, really, and allowing more people into the conversation. Heidi mentioned alternative independent media. And we're talking about participatory budgeting. I mentioned democratizing our workplaces. I think that we talk about liking democracy. We talk about giving more power to more people, but most people spend most of their waking lives in a fairly autocratic system, which is the 8 hours that they spend working in a traditional workplace. You don't really have much control over the kind of work that you're doing, certainly not over where the profits that you're generating are going. And so I think that one of the ways that democratizing workplaces could help is by giving people that vote and that voice in the process that affects them, the most in their workplaces for their economic well-being. Now, it certainly would be great if we had universal basic income backed by the things that Christopher is talking about to drive down the cost and create a sort of post-scarcity society. But in the transition of getting there, the average person is still working in a sort of a workplace where they don't really have any voice or vote. So I think that democratizing workplaces, I think giving folks the option in every industry of voting with their feet and going to a workplace where they have the ability to be heard and to have a voice and a vote in processes that affect them, I think would be a good step in that direction. And people often aren't engaged in the political process because in their normal workaday lives, they have no voice whatsoever. And so, they take it as a given that, that when they go to work in the morning and, spend their day at work, they're not going to be able to have any influence really over their what they're seeing before them. And so the same thing gets replicated in the government, where the representative that they send to office really is not terribly responsive to them, is much more responsive to the lobbyists, the moneyed interest, the corporation, that in turn is oppressing them both in their government and then in their workplace as well. So, I think that that the more that we can open up both of those systems, the economic system and the political system, toward participatory involvement, so much the better. Chris mentioned as well at the end there the idea of using blockchain. Certainly is a good innovation that could go toward that. Things like participatory democracy, also called liquid democracy, where you have sort of the best of both worlds of direct democracy and representative democracy, where you are able not only to participate in votes in your government on issues that are of importance to you, but if you don't feel like you have the time or the education on a certain topic, you're able to delegate that to someone else whom you trust, whether that's for a specific issue set or over a specific time period, or what have you. You're able to sort of control who you're giving your vote to, and letting them represent you, whether that happens to be your representative that you trust in government, or someone in your personal life that your economics professor friend who maybe knows a little bit more about economics. You can delegate certain things to them, where maybe you don't have the education level on that particular topic.
Cool. So this is really a fascinating conversation. We have about 5 minutes left till top of the hour. It looks like, Heidi, did you have something you wanted to add? No?
No, it's okay.
Okay. So we have about 5 minutes left, but I'd like to extend this just a little bit if you guys are willing, because I want to bring up, we've talked about a number, although it doesn't sound like it, perhaps, we've talked about a number of technologies that are collaborating to create this environment that could make Copiosis a more viable future. But I think one thing we haven't talked about, and I'm a little bit nervous bringing it up, is the technology, for lack of a better word, the technology of faith. And I know that Mike, I'm probably going to get the title wrong, but you're a conservative fundamentalist? No, conservative Christian. Is that right? Did I get that right?
I'm a theologically conservative evangelical Christian.
There you go.
I specify theologically conservative because obviously, as we've been mentioning, I'm very far to the left politically. But unlike many of my brothers and sisters on the left wing of the political spectrum, I am theologically conservative. Again, for those who maybe don't quite clue in about what that means, I do believe that the Bible is the Word of God, and believe wholeheartedly in that. So, in that respect, just within my own person, I am sort of a walking billboard for reaching across the aisle, so to speak. Many of my closest friends at church are politically very conservative, and whereas in my political life, my closest friends are theologically atheist. So. I'm very much someone who believes in sort of, talking in different ways to different people, and trying to reach a, common ground in that way.
Okay. Well, we've got about 3 minutes before I should give a break, but I'm going to take the break now because I want to get back to this part of this conversation, because I think it's definitely an important part of the toolbox that Copiosis is using. And so I want to have a conversation with all three of you about this component as a technology. But before we do that, for those of you who may be joining this session late, this is the Copiosis live stream. We are talking about the tools in the political arena that are on the horizon that could make Copiosis, could smooth the path towards Copiosis becoming a reality for all of us. We have three experts in that arena, or people with experience in the political arena. We're talking about these tools. If you're interested in finding out more about Copiosis, you can go to copiosis.com and find out all you want to know. You can also contact us through that website, and we will respond to any questions or comments or suggestions that you have. You can also, if you've been following Copiosis for a while and you want to get more involved, you can join us on our Copiosis social group on Facebook. Just search for Copiosis social group. And if you are a member of the social group or you're not, and you're wanting to support our work in some way, you can go to patreon.com and support us by becoming a patron. And then don't forget, since you're on YouTube, you might as well hit that subscribe button and then click the bell so that you get updates. I mean, you're already here. It's just a move of your mouths. Okay, so let's talk. I know this is going to be uncomfortable for some of the audience, because in this ecosystem, there aren't a lot of conversations about faith, so to speak, as a process for creating the environment for something like Copiosis to emerge. But since I teed it up and you had a good response to it, Mike, if you don't mind us starting with you, how do you see? So we've talked about some of these technologies, these strategies, political strategies, and there was a point in the show where some of us were saying, well, like, they sound great, but I don't know how they're going to happen, kind of a thing. How does faith answer that question? Do you want to kick that off, Mike?
Sure. So, I think that within my own faith tradition, there's a long standing notion of taking care of each other, and the sort of good neighbor potluck kind of mentality of the early church shared all their possessions in common, and sold those among them who were wealthy, sold their possessions and gave the money to the poor. So I think that fortunate reality is that certain social political concerns have allowed the sort of hijacking of that faith by folks who are more inclined toward sort of Ayn Rand, the rule of the wealthy kind of mentality, but at its basic root, my faith leads me to believe that we should be taking care of the basic needs of everyone in society, and having a real emphasis on making sure that the poorest members of society are given special attention and raised up to a level where they're not in want and need. So, I think that I see a lot of folks in pews around the country in churches who would be willing to be a part of something like this, because they see the value in providing for those basic needs of everyone, and the fact that it's not being done by an overarching sort of socialist government entity coming down and determining what's best for everyone, certainly would appeal to them, and certainly appeals to me as someone on the more libertarian, anti-state, anti-authoritarian end of the socialist spectrum.
Christopher or Heidi, you want to wade in here? If you don't, I have another. I'm going to take this a little deeper in the realm of faith.
Go ahead.
You're good? Okay.
So I'll
go
just
ahead.
say real quick. Yeah. So, I'm politically conservative in practice. That's what I do in my day job. My where I am in my mind politically is, just post-partisan. I just step away from it because I believe that the voicing of your opinion, it matters, but what is that doing to change the world? And it's, you can get bogged down in calling something right or wrong, and that's fine. It's our duty to express that. But also, let's participate in making and in being the change instead of saying that's not good. Because, but I'm not religious. So that's like, my colleagues are completely religious, but I hold my faith in humanity. I have faith in people. I have faith in these new movements that are looking to solve global grand challenges through using innovative, disruptive technologies that are subject to the 7Ds. And I'll just real quick, you digitize something, you have deceptive growth, then you have disruptive growth, and then it dematerializes, like the digital camera into the phone and the camcorder into the phone and everything into the phone. and then through that mechanism you demonetize it. So instead of like buying film for a camera and then having it developed and buying a photo album, you don't have to, there's marginally approaching zero cost for an extra picture. So I just call that zero marginal cost. But and then you can democratize. If it doesn't cost any money to do something, then you can use it as much as you can to get to your maximum bliss level, which is utility speak in economics. So this is just one of those studies that have been done on abundance economics. And then finally, if something's democratized, it doesn't mean that power can't accumulate around it, because photos, for example, you still have like Getty Images and National Geographic and Sports Illustrated that have these copyrights. So what's the answer to that? You create an open source cooperative platform initiative, and then you automate away the center and create your own, from society providing for society type deal. So that's my spiel.
Yeah, it's a beautiful spiel, and it supports where I was going to go, and I'd really like to hear Mike's response to what you just said, Christopher, and what I'm about to say. And Heidi, I'd love it if you may not have some familiarity with what we're talking about, but I'd really love your off the top of your head response to what Chris just said and Christopher just said and what I'm about to say. So, because I said I was going to take this a little deeper. So, when I mean faith, what I'm talking about is something like this. So when we in Copiosis were talking about some elements, it was me and the CTO. We were talking about elements that were missing in Copiosis that we needed in order for Copiosis to take the next step. And one of those things this was quite a while ago, one of those things that Jarek and I were talking about was the need for someone who had expertise in politics. And at the time, we didn't have anybody on the team that had that kind of expertise. Or if there was somebody following our work, they hadn't come forward. And then earlier this year, Christopher showed up, and he in my memory, his words were, I've been looking for something like this a long time. I totally align with what this is, and I'm here to do my part because it's really exciting to me. Now, when I say faith, I mean that somehow, some way, God or the universe or whatever conspires to bring the right elements together at the right time, whether you know the answer as to how it's going to happen or when it's going to happen or not. This greater force kind of puts all the elements together in perfect timing so that things move forward. And as an example of the evidence of this, I see things like UBI finally becoming into the mainstream as a result of Andrew Yang's candidacy. I see everything that Christopher just talked about with regard to technology and open source. I see everything that's happening with Copiosis in terms of the right people coming at the right time happening. It's almost like Morpheus in the movie The Matrix saying, where you see coincidence, I see providence. It's like this providence, this element of believing that it's going to happen because it's just meant to happen is what makes it happen. And that's what I refer to when I use the word faith. It's not really faith, it's just kind of like a knowing that it's going to happen. And so when we think about, well, how are we going to make a political process in such a way that it responds to KJ's concern that nobody believes they're listened to? Well, we don't have to have that answer because eventually it's going to happen in that way. And we see all of these technologies, including the political ones we've been talking about, slowly, gradually coming into or snapping into place. And these 5Ds that Christopher was just talking about, I think, is the framework around which 70s, thank you, 70s is the framework around which this happens. What do you think, you guys? What do you think? I mean, it's provocative.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I personally am not religious at all, but I'm definitely spiritual in some form, and I believe that what you're describing is essentially, one's own personal power. So if you, as a person, decide you want something bad enough, and then you start to create situations to make that a reality, whether whether you're doing it or not, rather. But either way, either you could be as active as, starting an organization like Copiosis, and then bringing in people, and then that obviously multiplies and the energy comes forward. Or sometimes it's more subtle and subliminal, and we're not always aware of when we make that decision, I think, in our head that something shall be. All the different things that we put into motion, not always consciously, sometimes, less consciously. So I think that that's the same thing. That was what people refer to as God or prayer or all of these things. I feel it's the same energy plane. When you want something bad enough and you put that out into the world, then the circumstances create themselves. And I think the humans have been doing that, forever. We've been constantly creating. We're creators by nature, and we constantly want to improve. We're never just satisfied with just, okay, that's it. No, like our brains are just hardwired to want to get better and better and better, and it'll become exponentially so with us now, using technology and essentially having computers with us at all times and becoming part of us. So I think that the faith that I have is just in our own personal power. And I think that if we all want something, if every single human on this planet wanted something, we'd find a way to make it happen. And I believe that, all the progress that we're talking about here is more than possible. If enough people want it, those situations are going to create themselves.
It's crazy because what I hear you saying, Heidi, is exactly what Christopher was saying a minute ago about his belief in people. And we see that the things that the 7Ds that Christopher talked about, where they're springing from people's minds, their own commitment. It's like you're saying, they're springing from people's commitment that they're going to do something to change the world in their own way. And this is where I'm feeling more excitement in this section of the show, because at least for me, we're talking about something really dear to my heart, which is this awareness of exactly what you said, Heidi, is that people who want it badly enough, and it doesn't have to be a lot of people, it can be one person.
Yeah.
And then to put it kind of in the words that Mike would agree with, one person can be inspired by God to create something that changes the world. And I think that's what we're seeing in all sorts of segments of our society.
There's actually a scripture that keeps jumping out at me when you're saying this, which is I believe from Romans, that all things work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to His purpose. And it's this idea that as you say, everything working together, even things that you didn't know about or think were good, can work together to reach the goal. And so, sort of you mentioned the Matrix. I was also thinking about a television program called Lost, where sort of the good guy in the show and the bad guy in the show are sitting on a beach. And the bad guy in the show, the man in black, says, there's a ship coming to the island, and he says, it only ever ends the same way with death and misery. And the good guy in the show, Jacob, says that it only ever ends once, and everything before that is just progress. And so it's this notion that whatever is coming together for things that we don't think are intertwined, things that we don't know are intertwined, are all working together for this same purpose. And so I think that there is providence in that, and there is sort of a grand design in that, and the arc of history is long, but that it bends toward justice.
Yeah. Well, wow, with that wonderful quote, I think we've come to a good place to conclude the show. Christopher, is there anything else you want to add before I move to conclude?
Yeah, I'll just conclude with this thought here. So there's a lot of people on both sides of the spectrum that don't believe that things are going to change, and they just they disconnect as a result and don't participate. So following that further, a lot of those people, don't believe that some of these technologies that we've brought up during this conversation are going to be influencing the way government is run and operated. And I'm just going to call that out right now and say that's not accurate, because we're already starting to see legislatures adopt blockchain as a viable record-keeping mechanism and using smart contracts to be able to act as a third party. So it's, the world is already changing. People do see this benefit. And I swear, when some of these, grassroots grown community initiatives that come to the Capitol as, just an interest group of constituents instead of a power player, they say we want something to happen. As soon as they start to incorporate some of these technologies like blockchain and create this open source economy of all these different interest groups coming into one focus that each staffer of a legislator can look at, that's going to change the game. Because usually in a lot of states, it's the staffers who make things happen. So just keep them, yes, talking to the rep is good, but then the rep goes to their staffer and says, make this happen. So I can go on forever with that, but it's just, things are going to change, and the pace of change is accelerating.
Beautiful, beautiful conclusion. Thank you all for being here. Heidi from Oregon, thank you so much. Mike from the Hoosier State, that was a great conclusion you just gave. Christopher, as always, you're brilliant. Really appreciate all of your participation. Members of the audience, thank you so much for watching. If you're watching this after the live stream, appreciate you taking the time to look it over, and come back next time, because we're going to have another stimulating topic to talk about. And well, just thank you and have a great rest of your day. Bye.